Mr. Chair, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. All right, the first bill will be Delegate Ferris. Is he here? And this bill is identical to Senator Lewis's bill, which passed here 15 to nothing, and the Senate 40 to nothing. You may?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
There's a motion to report and a second. All those in favor of reporting House Bill 2482 vote aye. Those opposed vote nay. You're done.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and you too. You too.
Ayes 11, no zero.
Ayes 11, no zero. Bill's reported.
So I'm getting that second.
Next, and my understanding is he wants to delete the bill, but is Delegate Ware here?
No, he
Delegate Kilgore? Did you want to? We had heard he was going to strike the bill, but I don't want to do it without him being here.
I'll find out.
Okay. All right. The next bill.
Are we going to do it, Mr. Chairman?
The next bill.
See, he asked him to do
Chairman,
it.
I moved to strike his bill. He asked me to do that so he wouldn't have to be here.
Second. Okay.
All right. There's a motion. I need a second to strike.
Second.
That would be 1430. All those in favor of striking the bill at the request of the patron, vote aye.
Ayes 12, no zero.
Ayes 12, no zero. The bill is stricken. All right. The next is House Bill 1770. That is somewhat similar to my 1265, and I will make the motion that we conform it to Senate Bill 1265. There's a motion and a second. All those for conforming Senate Bill 1265, which I believe was the governor's amendment, to Senate Bill 1265, conforming 1770 and 1265, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One no. He thinks rates should go up $17 a month. All right. Is there a motion now to report 1770 as amended to conform to Senate Bill 1265? There's a motion and a second?
Yes.
All right. All those in favor of reporting 1770 as amended, vote aye. Those opposed, nay.
Ayes 10, noes 3.
You're all in favor of $17 a month increases for your constituents. All right. Next is House Bill 2267, Delegate Wilt. And this is similar to Senator Sugarline's bill, Electric Utilities Cost Recovery Alternative Rate Adjustment Clause. You want to explain?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Before I do, it was brought to my attention from this young lady right here that we might do an amendment on line 16, the word better, strike one of them. The word better is redundant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate Will. It's line 16 after ratepayers strike better.
Okay. All those of striking the word second better, vote, say aye. Those opposed? All right, the bill is amended. Go ahead.
And, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. I think I was looking at the wrong bill. Is that right?
Twenty-two sixty-seven.
20, okay, nope, okay, we're right. I'm good, I'm sorry. Appreciate it. 2267, Mr. Chairman, so what this bill is very, very narrowly drawn, and what it would do, it would give the SEC the authority. I mean, they're the experts in this field, or, we like to think they are. It would give them, it would restore their ability to determine whether utility costs are best recovered through the base rate or RACs. And, Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm not against RACs, okay? Please understand that. I think they have been a great tool in the past, but I am concerned that they've, as we've come forward, they've kind of distorted the picture a little bit as far as, utility rates and bills and whatnot. And, Mr. Chairman, I think even Dominion would admit, I mean, I've read things where they have said, they're experiencing some volatility and so forth, and that the whole realm of rates and whatnot, and looking at, restructuring how they do business. And I think this would be a great place to start.
All right. There any questions of the patron?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Spruill?
it is, bill similar to the one that we PBI'd, Senate Bill 1417.
No, it was, yes, it was PBI.
Thank you. Second question, Mr. Chairman, so, would this make it any better than what we had before? Would this, the amendment that we just got through doing, would it make it
I
any
don't think
better?
it makes a big impact on the bill. No, it does not.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Since we've heard this, all right, are there any motions? Any motions? All right. Doesn't look like there's one, so the bill dies for lack of a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move to report it. Senator Edmund will second it.
All right. There's a motion to report House Bill 2267.
Mr. Chairman, substitute motion to PBI.
Substitute motion PBI. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Substitute motion takes precedence first. All those in favor of passing by indefinitely vote aye. Those opposed, nay.
Ayes 7, no 6.
All right, bill is passed by indefinitely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would you like me to present the second bill?
Which one is that, Delegate Wilt?
It's 2130.
2130.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, you want to explain that?
Certainly will, Mr. Chairman. So House Bill 2130, what it does, I call it a grid reliability bill, and what it does, Mr. Chairman and committee members, it allows the SCC to, on themselves, determine whether closing down electric generation facilities are in the best interest of the grid and the customers.
Let me stop you there. Isn't that same thing already in the Virginia Clean Economy Act?
That is what's claimed. The difference is the utility has to, as I understand how it works, the utility would have to require or request that be looked at from the SEC. This would give the SEC complete authority, separate authority to look at it on their own.
But they still could do it under the VECA.
Well, that's presumably true, but Mr. Chairman, if I could, have a report that SEC, we require the SEC to do an annual report, and their most recent report is September of 22 on page 47, and I'll quote, "We bring to the General Assembly's attention a matter for its consideration, specifically the Commission's lack of proactive authority under current law to protect reliability and security of electric service resulting from VCEA-directed retirement unless there is a request by the utility. And further down in the body of the letter, and after the fact review of finding harm to reliability and/or security of electric service would leave the commission with few options to protect customers. So, Mr. Chairman, I would say that, based on the State Corporation Commission's their own writing here, that they don't feel that the Clean Economy Act, as it's currently, gives them solid enough ability to protect the grid.
Did they request this bill?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, any questions of the patron? All right, anyone in the audience want to speak in support of the bill? Anyone in the audience want to speak in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Victoria Higgins, Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund. We are opposed to the bill. As per your own questions, the VCA already well covers the issue of reliability. Furthermore, that's not the only thing that this bill does. It also casts into doubt our procurements of wind and solar energy and asks us to consider, instead of what's written, a litany of other energy sources. We consider it incredibly harmful to our clean energy goals, and we oppose the legislation. Thank you very much.
Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Connor Kish with the Sierra Club, and I think great respect for Delegate Wilton. We've talked about this issue, but we oppose the bill, and I want to point the committee to specifically Enactment Clause 9 of the VCEA. We've had this conversation over and over again, and I just want to emphasize to the committee that when the Virginia Clean Economy Act passed, the stakeholders considered the reliability of the grid as part of that. And Enactment Clause 9 of the VCEA says that nothing in this act shall require the utilities or the State Corporation Commission to take any action that in the State Corporation Commission's discretion and after consideration of all in-state and regional transmission entity resources threatens the reliability or security of electric service to the utilities customers. So we believe the VCA handles this issue, and with respect to Delegate Wilt, we oppose the bill.
All right. Next.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Kim Jermaine with Advanced Energy United, and for the reasons outlined, we oppose the legislation.
Next.
Blair St. Ledger Olson, Climate Cabinet Action. We also oppose the bill. Thank you.
Next.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Sean Suarez with Virginia Conservation Network, and we oppose the bill. Thank you.
Chris Lane, Virginia League of Conservation Voters. With respect to the patron, we also oppose this bill.
All right. Want to wrap it up, Delegate?
I appreciate all the comments,
right.
but I can't deny
Okay.
the statement from the State Corporation Commission.
2130 is before us. Is there a motion?
I'll move to report.
Substitute motion.
All right, there's a motion of
Second.
and a substitute motion. Go, what's your substitute motion?
PBI.
PBI. Is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. All right, you've heard the motion before us is to pass by indefinitely. All those in favor of passing by indefinitely, House Bill 2130, vote aye. Those opposed, nay.
Ayes 12, noes 2.
Ayes 12, noes 2. Bill is passed by.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your and the committee's time.
Wait a second. All right, Delegate Byron, we'll take up 2197.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This bill expands the definition of renewable energy to include nuclear and also includes advanced nuclear technology. Mr. Chairman, just to make this nice and simple, we all know that we are progressing towards an emission-free environment. In order to do that and make sure that we have a base load to be able to supply the energy needs that are out there, we are going to need to ensure that we include nuclear and advanced nuclear technology in the RPS. Now,
Right now, 30% of our Virginia's electricity generation is already supplied by nuclear energy. And we also know that we're home to one of the most advanced nuclear energy supply chains in the world. In fact, one of the most well-respected manufacturers is right in Newport News of nuclear technology and has been powering our U.S. Navy for over 50 years. Advances in small modular reactors, which Senator Newman and I both have, the only company in Virginia that is doing that, have advanced rapidly, and a commercial product is expected to be tested in Ontario, Canada by 2028. Mr. Chairman, looking at this, it was clear that there is not any kind of definition that has already been put in the code. This doesn't change the Clear Economy Act. This just recognizes the need to make sure that when you're doing all these other things, that we do have enough to keep our baseload going and that we're able to supply the needs of the companies and the electrical vehicles and everything else that we are depending on. So I hope it'd be your pleasure to pass this bill.
Questions of the patron? All right. Anyone in the audience want to speak in support of the bill? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Bernie McNamee with McGuire Woods, representing Dominion, and we support the bill.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, Brett Vassy, CEO of the Virginia Manufacturers Association. We support the bill. We also have heard one argument as this bill has moved about what do we do about the waste or uranium. I will also say, for the committee's knowledge, the same manufacturer, BWXT, one of their subsidiaries, has gotten the only license in the United States in the last 2 weeks to do highly enriched uranium reprocessing for fuel. So they are on track by 2028 for this technology. The entire supply chain is American-made and in Virginia.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aries Loomis. Thank you for having me. I'm a PhD student at Virginia Commonwealth University, and on behalf of our Department of Mechanical and Nuclear Engineering, I'm here to talk about how important nuclear energy is in terms of moving away from the use of fossil fuels. If we want to talk about environmental justice, air pollution, as well as rising temperatures from climate change are only increasing and disproportionately affecting low-income communities and communities of color. So we do hope that you are in support of this bill. Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. My name is April Wade. I'm the Executive Director for the Virginia Nuclear Energy Consortium. We support this bill, and we hope you will too. Thank you.
Okay. Is there opposition?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Connor Kish with the Sierra Club, and appreciate your time. This is a very complicated issue, and the bill really, in our view, harms the intent of the Virginia Clean Economy Act when we set out to create the renewable portfolio standard, where we could set up a market for truly renewable sources like wind and solar and battery storage to grow in Virginia. We did not ignore nuclear power in the Virginia Clean Economy Act. In fact, separate sections and the existing law allow for the Virginia Clean Economy Act to allow for nuclear development even today. Not only did it protect the existing nuclear facilities that we have in Virginia, by inserting nuclear and other sources of energy into the RPS, it diminishes the goals of the Virginia Clean Economy Act, and I think is ultimately unnecessary, as nuclear projects could go forward today in Virginia with the approval of the Virginia State Corporation Commission. So with that said, we do oppose the bill. Thank you.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
And I know it's in the Clean Economy Act, but just says that renewable energy will include advanced nuclear technology or hydrogen. I don't see the harm.
So the harm in our view, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, is that the renewable portfolio standard is separated out from the other portions of the total energy that we use in Virginia as a mechanism to grow those industries specifically as we try to get to 2045 and 2050 goals. By putting nuclear and hydrogen into that sort of triangle of the pie, if you will, you're left with nuclear on this side and nuclear on this side. And in our view, then you're going to really hurt the ability to grow the truly renewable energy sources that we set out to grow in the Virginia Clean Economy Act. So it's not necessarily.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, except for the fact that Dominion has a massive offshore wind project going on right now. I don't think we're ignoring, wind and solar or whatever else. I just see this being included in the definition.
And I think that you're seeing, Mr. Chairman, I think that you're seeing the growth of the offshore wind industry, and you're also seeing the growth of the solar industry because the RPS allows that market to grow and solidifies their ability to grow their businesses and to make those investments. So without having the RPS the way that it is designed in the Virginia Clean Economy Act, they're going to be competing against other resources that they're already competing against. And if we're trying to get to a full clean energy future by 2045, then that makes that goal really difficult.
Well, I don't think we can get there without nuclear power.
I agree with you.
Okay, all right, next.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Kim Jemaine with Advanced Energy United. We're a trade association that represents the full suite of advanced energy technologies, which includes hydrogen, solar, green hydrogen, solar, wind, all the good stuff. When you hear the governor says all of the above approach, that's what we represent. Unfortunately, nuclear is not a renewable energy source. For that simple reason, it should not be included in the renewable portfolio standard. Secondly, not all hydrogen is necessarily clean or produced in a renewable manner. While green or clean hydrogen may be, the production of other forms can create substantial emissions. We think this is an issue that should be studied. It's an issue that we need to take a little bit more time to evaluate, and for that reason, we oppose the legislation strongly.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question for.
Hold on, Senator Servo.
Thanks, and I appreciate you highlighting the hydrogen piece, and I know there's green hydrogen, blue hydrogen.
Pink hydrogen.
Yeah, pink, okay. Now we have brown, which I think is what most people use to refer to as hydrogen that is generated using either coal or gas created electricity. Are you aware of another state in America that qualifies brown hydrogen as renewable under their renewable portfolio standard?
Mr. Chair, Senator, not to my knowledge, and this legislation specifically does not, it doesn't qualify hydrogen at all. It uses that term very broadly, which we think is very problematic.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Peter Anderson. I'm with Appalachian Voices. We also oppose the bill. I'll just echo my colleagues' comments. We don't have an issue with advanced nuclear technology. It's tilting the incentive towards advanced nuclear and away from wind and solar. And then on the hydrogen piece, I'm glad to hear the discussion. I was going to raise it myself if it wasn't raised. What industry is talking about right now in terms of converting the feedstock for hydrogen is typically talked about as being natural gas. So what we'd be doing by adding it to the RPS here is incentivizing the conversion of natural gas into hydrogen to make electricity. And so we don't believe that that's clean energy. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, for the reasons that my colleagues have stated, we oppose the bill as Virginia Conservation Network. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, as my colleagues have stated, voting green or voting red on this is not about whether you're pro or anti-nuclear. It's about whether or not you think that nuclear energy should be placed in the RPS. And that's what we'd like you to vote on. And for that reason and the reason explained by our colleagues, we'd ask you to vote no on this bill.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Blair St. Ledger Olson with Climate Cabinet Action, and for the reasons previously expressed, we oppose the bill. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon, Chairman, Senators. My name's Erica Gray. I live in Henrico, Virginia, and I'm a mother and a grandmother. And I've been to a lot of these meetings over the years. And as it goes for the renewable energy standards, nuclear energy is not renewable. And it's not emissions-free because it emits gases and effluents that are radioactive into our environment on a routine basis. It should not be included under renewable energy. And as other people spoke about the hydrogen, there's a lot of things that aren't spoken to regarding that. So I would appreciate it if y'all would please oppose it. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Victoria Higgins, Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund. We do oppose the bill for many of the reasons enumerated by other members of the environmental community. I also want to make one other point, which is that many bills have come before this committee that support nuclear energy in through various methods, and these are bills that the environmental community at large has not opposed. So we are not asking you to take an anti-nuclear position. We're asking you to take a position against this particular bill, which we think is harmful to our clean energy future. I have the 5 bills here that we have not opposed, if you're interested in hearing them, but thank you.
My name is Portnoy Evans Johnson, and I wanted to read this that was just sent to me from Glenn Bessa and James Shelton. The small nuclear reactors are an unproven technology not ready until 2029. They generate more toxic waste per kilowatt hour of electricity than our large nuclear plants, and those are both toxic waste sites. It costs a lot more than wind and solar, which is getting cheaper. Why should the public pay billions for this? I stand with the environmental groups. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, not putting a definition in our code and starting to look forward about nuclear is not going to keep it away. Those of you that know in this committee, I guess it was the weekend of Christmas, Dominion had a situation where they had an emergency and we almost had a blackout. And if it wasn't for nuclear and some of the other things, we would have had that very thing happen. And this is before you start plugging in more vehicles and having more demand from data centers and everything else that's going to take place. So I don't think the argument is that someone is trying to slow down the process of wind or any of the other clean energy you're supposed to do, but just to make sure those emergency situations, the federal government in particular is designing the SMDR just for that very reason. So those small modular reactors can be used in the event of a catastrophic situation where they need to quickly get energy somewhere and be able to light up Roanoke or light up some area that has had some devastation on them. And that's the reason for the bill.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
Senator Norman, then Senator Bill.
Senator Byron, I'm just interested in, I came in a little late, but I did notice a certain consistency from the environmental community. Did that community make any good faith efforts with you to try to recast or rewrite the bill so that it might be acceptable to them?
I haven't heard from anyone.
Shock.
Senator Bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question, in the bill, line 200, it says it defines a small modular reactor of up to 400 megawatts per reactor. I was wondering that definition, because I looked around a few places, including the International Atomic Energy website, and they define it as less than 300 megawatts. Was there a different standard used for that?
I'm going to call Bernie up. We checked not only with Bernie helped me, BWXT. I wanted to make sure that they were okay with it, so they are our manufacturer in Virginia, and this is what we got cleared.
Senator, the delegate's correct. I'm Bernie McMee with McGuire Woods representing Dominion. The definition of small modular reactor generally has been around 300, 350, but there's no set definition. And so the proposal for up to 400 was as technology develops or as uprates are available, so you didn't have to keep coming back and amending the code in order to accommodate. So 400 seemed like a reasonable number to make sure that they still fit within the SMR size, but that it wasn't artificially limited with the definition that hasn't been clearly defined either by the United States or the international community.
Mr. Chairman. Go ahead. I don't know if Survey wants to go. I haven't.
No, I have a.
Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion. I don't know if you got
to. Mr. Chairman, before we do that. Kathy, Delegate Byron, I've never heard of brown hydrogen, but if it is, and I trust these people know more than I do, it would be any reason why we could not take that out of the bill by just saying we're not talking about dirty hydrogen?
That's really complicated.
I mean, you can do yeah, you understand what I'm saying. You dirty hydrogen.
Senator, I understand that this was rolled in from Delegate Kilgore's bill, the hydrogen. And my understanding, without taking a position for Delegate Byron or Delegate Kilgore, is there are different types of hydrogen. The federal government is considering both green hydrogen, which is you produce hydrogen from wind or solar. There's also pink, I think it's pink hydrogen that comes from nuclear. Those are things that are also being funded in the IRA. The Inflation Reduction Act is seen as something that could be beneficial, and other states are doing that as well.
Mr. Chairman, I think council has an amendment that hopefully will get out the brown hydrogen, because I think most of the speakers had concern about that, and I'm just seeing if we can remove that concern.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Newman, on lines 164 and 293, after hydrogen, insert other than hydrogen derived from coal or natural gas.
Mr. Chair.
And line 293, yes, sir.
Explain I appreciate understanding what that means.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Deeds, my understanding of brown hydrogen is that it's hydrogen produced through the gasification of coal or natural gas. Please don't ask me another question about that.
Mr. Chair, I do have another question. What about that amendment makes nuclear power renewable? It's simply not renewable.
Mr. Chairman, it doesn't. It has nothing to do with nuclear whatsoever. This is only related to hydrogen, and is in response to the environmental industry who came forward and had what sounded like a reasonable concern that there is hydrogen that can be produced from coal and other dirty products, and it's an attempt to remove those.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, you know, the problem with all this is that the hydrogen piece is wrapped up in a lot of federal funding incentives that I'm not sure the guidance has even come out on completely yet. And coming up with our own unique definition that's not consistent with whatever the federal definition is might create its own whole other separate suite of problems. And from my perspective, this, you know, I think Delegate Byron might be on the scent of something here, but from my perspective, it's not exactly ripe yet. And the feds, I think, need to speak a little more before we dive into this. And my suggestion was going to be that we pass this by indefinitely and then send it to the CUR to study it over the next year, where we might have a little more time to look at this and figure out the right way to incorporate these concepts into our RPS in a more reasoned fashion. That would be my motion. That'd be my motion.
Substitute motion, Mr. Chairman.
All right, substitute motion.
And move to report.
All right, there's a motion, and a second to report House Bill 2197. Did we amend it? We don't have to. We don't have to. All right.
It's not going to change.
All those in favor of reporting the bill vote aye. Those opposed, nay.
Ayes 4, noes 11.
Mr. Chair, we need to go back to the primary motion.
Mr. Chairman, may I just say one thing that I wasn't able to answer earlier? There are credits that are available now, and that's one of the reasons for getting that through. They have a $3 per kilogram credit for the first 10 years of operation, and they're starting to really utilize those now. That was the reason, to try to get it sooner than later. So thank you.
Okay. All right, pass by with a letter to CR. All those in favor of passing by, definitely vote aye, and opposed, nay.
Ayes 11, noes 4.
Delegate Kilgore.
Which one you want to do, Mr. Chairman? I can let some of these other, I've got two bills. I can let some of these other guys go in front of me. I've got two bills, Mr. Chairman. I'll let these individuals go in front of me. They've got only one bill. They were grown.
All right, y'all get Weaver.
I guess I am there. Hello, Mr. Chairman. Trying to take turns on walking up to the gallows. If I could, I'll offer, I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute. I'll explain what it does, and then then the committee can figure out what they'd like. So basically what it does, so when we started, the bill originally dealt with just solar as a competitive procurement. So basically what the bill does now in the substitute is it subjects phase one, phase utility when going to build a new solar facility and only a solar facility under the same provisions that the third-party builders have undergone. So in the Clean Economy Act, if you look at lines 57 through 257 through 275, there's 7 things that the third-party builders, when they're building a solar facility, have to do. This just basically, as a Section 1 bill reinstates that Dominion has to do the same thing.
Mr. Chairman?
I think I'm all right.
I have a question for council. Or maybe Delegate Weber can answer it as well if he knows, but I thought there was a provision in the VCA that said that 35% or something of everything constructed has to be constructed by a third party or subject to procurement already or something, so.
Yes, but this is when they're building their own, they have to follow the same steps for procurement.
Okay, further question for council? So how would the SCC know whether to follow the code or this Section 1 bill if we've got 2 conflicting laws out there?
I defer to the SEC on that, sir.
Okay, thanks.
And I apologize. We've been working with some of the solar folks in Dominion on trying to come up with language that everybody was happy with. So this is the result as you see it. So.
Go ahead and explain this now.
So I mean that's literally what the bill does, Mr. Chairman. Is it says that when the Dominion or a phase 1 phase utility is going to build a generates energy derived from sunlight, i.e. solar, that they have to undergo the same kind of process that the third party does.
Any more questions in the paper? All right, those in the audience support the bill?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Rob Shin with Next Year Energy. We appreciate the work with the patron. And just to clarify what it does, because there is some ambiguity. So under the Clean Economy Act, there's 65% of the solar projects that are Dominion either buys from third parties like our company or they build themselves. 35% of the projects are built by third parties, go through permit by rule, never go to the State Corporation Commission. When Dominion does a competitive procurement, they basically will bundle the projects and take them to the commission for the certificate process. This bill now would simply clarify that the projects that Dominion builds themselves will be subject to the same criteria as third parties. So I think it's really pretty simple.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Moran, BAFA, Dominion Energy, to respond to Senator Serval's question. For the 65% that the utility does, it has been our practice to do a competitive solicitation to get the best, most cost-effective, least impactful in terms of siting projects, and this would formalize that process that we've been using. And when we do a filing with the commission, we'll bundle both those we're doing and those we're doing PPAs with, so it'll be a mix of the two. But this will be formalized in a process we've been using, and we think it is in harmony with what's in the Clean Economy Act.
Mr. Chairman.
For those reasons, we support it.
Bill, is there, in any way, are we going to be pushing you to buy low cost with this? In other words, is this going to keep you from, in any way, from buying high quality?
There's not an absolute, when we do an RFP, Senator Newman, I think it's sort of the, what I will call, and this is a layperson's term, but like lowest responsive bidder. So lowest one that has the quality that you're looking for, that has the right siting, that is in a community that supports the project. We'll look at all those factors. Yes, sir. That's a better way to say it. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I had a question for the patron.
Yes, sir.
So, Mr. Chairman, or Delegate, I mean, I get what you're trying to do. You're trying to basically change the VCA without actually amending the VCA itself. So you put it in a Section 1 bill instead of in the VCA. I get that. So here's, if we were to pass this, do we have your commitment that if a certain person that habitates on a different floor of our Capitol were to try to make some changes to this, to make it broader than what you're trying to do here, to start messing with other provisions of the statute you're not trying to avoid, you're not trying to amend?
Yes, sir.
Would you resist those amendments?
And that's one of the reasons why we made it a Section 1 bill, was so that things couldn't be toyed with. So, yes,
Okay,
sir.
and you would resist those amendments?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I don't think we ever adopted the sub. So I move the sub.
Second. Motion and a second to adopt the sub. All those in favor of adopting, say aye.
Aye.
All right, so now the motion would be to report the subject, 2305, amended. All right, there's a motion, is there a second? Second. All right, all those in favor of reporting, House Bill 2305 as a substitute, vote aye. Those opposed, nay.
Ayes 13, noes 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's a fairly straightforward bill. This is HB 1797. Simply states that notwithstanding any other provision of law, beginning with the commercial operation extending the life of any offshore wind facility constructed pursuant to this section by a Phase 2 utility, customers shall be held harmless for any shortfall in energy production below an annual net capacity factor of 42% as measured on a 3-year rolling average and is determined by the commission. Again, the only purpose here is to make sure that when we go forward with these offshore wind facilities, that if it doesn't produce the sort of energy, the ratepayers will not be held accountable to make up the difference. And I'll be happy to take any questions from the committee.
Questions? All right. Those supporting the bill? Those in opposition to the bill?
Mr. Chairman, Bill Murray on behalf of Dominion Energy. What this bill does in effect is it reverses a December 2022 SCC decision that approved a stipulation, was approved by a wide variety of stakeholders, ourselves, the Attorney General's office, Walmart, Appalachian Voices, and the Sierra Club. Now, I'm simply representing what the settlement did. I'm not speaking on their behalf with regard to the bill. They can speak for themselves. The Commission did rule in August with a performance standard, which this bill reflects, then granted reconsideration, and then through an exhaustive multi-month process resulted in the second decision and then the final decision. So what this bill would in effect do is say you've got a final order from the Commission and the General Assembly can come in and still reverse that, and for those reasons, yes, sir. For those reasons, we would respectfully oppose the bill.
Bill's before us. Is there a motion? Second. There's a motion and a second to pass by indefinitely. All those in favor of passing by indefinitely vote aye. Those opposed, nay. All right, bill's passed by indefinitely.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee.
Ayes 13, noes 2.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I have a substitute that I've submitted, and if I can speak to that substitute.
Motion and second to adopt the substitute. All those in favor of adopting the substitute for House Bill 2389, say aye. Aye. It's adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, sir. HB 2389. This bill is a byproduct of what has occurred from the COVID pandemic. And this will specify the conditions under which a mortgage loan originator may conduct licensable activities at an unlicensed or unregistered remote location. It allows MLOs to have flexibility on work location, gives consumers, clients additional access to their MLOs at the times most convenient to the customer and not limited to a 9 to 5 office hour. Prepares the industry for next natural disaster or pandemic, God forbid, and aligns with other states' approaches to the MLO remote work. MLOs are supervised by the licensee. Ultimate responsibility and liability for MLO oversight rests with the licensee. MLOs are not allowed to store physical records at a remote location. And last, MLOs are not allowed to meet clients at their residence unless the residence is licensed. I have the commissioner here and some other folks to speak to if you have any other questions.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did you say that they can't, if they're working out of their home, they can't meet a client there?
If they're licensed, they can.
Oh, they can?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
If they're licensed.
Other questions? All right, those in the audience in support of the bill? Go forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Trey Adams, working on behalf of Rocket Mortgage. We worked with Commissioner Face to get this substitute together. We hope.
Opposition? There is none. Move report. Second. Motion to report and a second. All those in favor of reporting House Bill 2389 amended with a substitute, vote aye. Those opposed, nay.
Ayes 15, no zero.
Ayes 15, no zero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Delegate Marshall.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. House Bill 2333. So this is about small modular reactors that are advanced nuclear reactors that produce nuclear power and have a power capacity up to 400 megawatts. I think that was in Byron's bill that was just before you. SMRs can provide reliable, around-the-clock, emissions-free electricity. According to the U.S. Department of Energy, SMRs offer advantages such as relatively small physical footprints, reduced capital investments, ability to be sited in locations not possible for large nuclear plants, and provisions for incremental power advantages. The bill establishes an SMR pilot program to make Virginia a leader in the development, manufacture, and construction and operation of SMR nuclear reactors. So that's the bill.
Okay. Questions of the paper?
Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So, I've had some stuff put in front of me about what's going on out in Utah, I guess, with their SMR they're trying to develop out there. Right now, I think they're looking at a cost of something like $8 or $9 billion for one of these. 5.3 billion to 9.3 billion is what they're currently estimating it might cost to do theirs, right? And we're talking about 3 of those in this bill you've proposed, and this wind farm we've already authorized is what, 11 billion or something for a lot more power. I mean, so what? Are you concerned about the cost of this at all, or the risk to ratepayers? Because I mean, there's nothing in your bill that talks about the risk to ratepayers.
So I think that if you look at the one that you're referring to out west is a pilot program. It's going. It's the first one. I don't think that these are going to be online for probably a decade. So I don't know if we're going to be first in the country to do so. But I've got somebody probably who knows actually what they're talking about. That if I could phone a friend and ask someone to come up. Bernie.
Thank you. Senator, I'm Bernie McNamee from McGuire Woods representing Dominion. A couple of the issues in response with the bill is drawn so that that a CPCN would still have to be applied to the commission, and the commission would still have its authority to determine if it was reasonable and prudent, and so cost considerations would be able to be considered when the application is made. Presumably, a lot of the development costs that are going on with Utah, Idaho, other places are going to be farther along by that time.
Mr. Chairman. So cutting to the chase, I mean, I understand that in theory that's how you might see the draft. Problem is, it says that the SEC shall establish a pilot, and then it talks about how the policy of the Commonwealth is to develop these things, and that the SEC has to basically interpret every possible inference in the law in favor of pushing these. So I understand it's not saying it's in the public interest, but it sort of walks up to the cliff and looks over the edge and doesn't jump. So, I mean, I don't feel quite as optimistic as you are that the SEC will feel like it's quite as unburdened the way this thing is written. So, and I had a sub-written, which I've shared with the patron, and a couple of different versions of it. And Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to move that sub at some point in time. And I can explain it. It's been published. I can explain it at that time.
Second. Well, go ahead.
So I think you're going to have another sub also, or either an amendment. So do we want to put them both on the table at one time? I think Senator Lewis has one
Yeah,
that.
we both have one. Why don't you present yours first, and then Senator Lewis, you present yours.
Okay, you mean to explain mine, Mr. Chairman? Tom, I think, has published it online. I don't think we're handing out paper in this committee, but if you look at my sub, basically what it does is it does not include the shall language about establishing the pilot. It says that the commission may establish a pilot, which makes me feel a lot safer about whether the SEC would feel compelled to do it or not. Secondly, on lines 21 through 23, it says that the SEC shall only establish the pilot if they're satisfied that at least 50% of the costs of these SMRs are going to be borne by somebody other than ratepayers. So federal, state, tax credits, things like that. And I recognize that part of what's driving this discussion is there are some new federal tax credits that are available for advanced nuclear, and some folks want to get to the finish line first on that. And there was a big Washington Post story about that yesterday, actually. But anyways, this lines 21 through 24 specifically reference that, ratepayers, shouldn't be paying for 50%. We need to go after that other money for it. And then if you go to page 2 of the sub, lines 27 through 30, it specifically requires the SEC to evaluate the levelized cost of nuclear against other possible sources of energy like solar, wind, or any other options that are out there, so that the SEC doesn't feel like this policy statement that's in Delegate Marshall's bill sort of trumps whatever else it is they're supposed to look at. And so it basically tries to say we're not going to try and put our thumb on the scale as a legislature about which type of power they're to look at. They're to look at nuclear, put it next to everything else after taking account for all this federal money that's out there, and then make the decision instead of say, well, the legislature told us we want to do SMRs, we're going to do SMRs. Then if you go to lines 31 through 45, this gets into other factors the SEC is to look at when they make the determination. Right now it has 3 sites, and then it asks, I originally had struck a lot of the language from 32 to 38, but I'd stuck it back in after Delegate Marshall pointed out to me that I'd cut out Danville and a couple other areas that he cared about. But the way I'd originally written it was to focus on constructing a reactor in one of these federal energy areas. The federal law that just came down, Senator Manchin put in language about energy areas, which were basically coal communities. And Delegate Marshall pointed out to me that excluded brownfields and former coal plants. And so I put that back in here as sites that the SEC should consider, because there was a concern the way I'd written mine that it might preference nuclear sites to the exclusion of the others. And then at the end, of lines 40 through 45, it specifically directs the SCC to look at whether the costs of the program are reasonable, prudent relative to these, again, levelized sources. It also asks them to look at the economic, environmental benefits and externalities. And the reason that language is in there is because it's, I think, been a little unclear over the last, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, whether the SCC is in fact looking at a complete picture of the cost of energy, including, the benefits of climate change, the health effects, externalities like nuclear waste, et cetera, which it's not, unless we specifically spell it out, it's not clear to look at that. And then lines 44 through 45 makes clear that none of this is deemed to limit the SCC's discretion in any way whatsoever. And then the last paragraph, paragraph D, which is lines 46 through 52, specifically says that ratepayers are not going to pay for any of this until and unless this thing's turned on, plugged in, and generating electricity. And so there's not going to be any ratepayer risk for 10 years. And I would just note that, Mr. Chairman, that I think it was in 2017, we were asked to advance costs on about $800 million of nuclear projects that had not been turned online or no longer being developed. And I was hoping to avoid that type of scenario again by putting in subparagraph D. So that's what the last one does. That's basically what my sub does.
Senator Norman.
Mr. Chairman, my head is swirling, and my question to Senator Servell is, did you share and try to market this before we got here, or are you just using your innate brilliance?
Yeah, I received it at 7:30 this morning.
Wow.
Okay.
Do you want me to answer his question?
You just did.
Okay.
All right, Senator Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The attractiveness of mine is the elegance of its simplicity. My good friend's a little over-anxious sometimes. If you look online, mine's online now too. It's about eight lines. We take the offensive letter D on line 45, and we rewrite that. And essentially what mine says, and I'll go ahead and read it to you, because when this bill was filed, everybody trooped into the offices. I'm sure everybody here, everybody trooped in their office. We love nuclear, but this is a problem. And the problem was, the fundamental problem, as best I could glean from everybody, was that we were putting our finger on the scale with the SCC. We were usurping the SCC's functions. And so what this amendment of mine does in 8 sentences is reassert the relevance of the SCC in any kind of pilot program. It says nothing in this section shall be construed to limit the ability of the Commission to approve or deny a certificate of public convenience and necessity for a small modular nuclear reactor under this pilot program, or evaluate the reasonableness and prudence of the costs associated with such program. I mean, that's it in a nutshell, and that's what I've understood has been the problem with everybody with this bill. We're giving it to the folks. There are 600 people over there at the SCC. Take a look at these things, and I think they're more than capable of weighing these the cost-benefit analysis here. Goes on to say that we're going to utilize federal funds to the maximum extent available, to the greatest extent possible, in carrying out the goals of this pilot program. Now, as Senator Sorrell said, it says shall establish the pilot program. It does say that. We're laying down a public policy marker so that everybody knows that we're moving forward in this direction, because we all seem to think we'd like nuclear. But they still have to apply for the certificate of public necessity and convenience and go through that process. And if you look at the code section referenced there, 56-580, paragraph subsection D of that code section, which deals with certificates of public necessity and convenience, there are so many things in there that they have, and this isn't part of my amendment, this is part of Delegate Marshall's original initiative here, will have no material adverse effect upon reliability of electric service, are required by the projects are required by the public convenience and necessity, hence the name, and shall not otherwise be contrary to the public interest. I mean, that's just like wide open for the SCC to evaluate these projects from all different viewpoints and all different levels. And again, I think we've gotten rid of what was problematic for me when I first saw this bill was the language in Section D about liberally construe, which did seem to put the finger on the scale a little bit. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's why I think this is a much simpler, more targeted approach. It does what we say we all want to do, throw this at the SCC and their experts to evaluate these programs. And in addition to that, Mr. Chairman, I think everybody's talked about the number of pilots, whether some people want 1, some people want 3. So while not a part of this amendment, I would also propose reducing the number to 2 pilot projects. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Lucas?
I was going to move the Lewis amendment.
Chairman, could we hear public comment on, I know it's a little unusual to hear public comment on 2 different approaches here to the substitute, but I think that might provide some clarity. I've tried in the hallway and earlier today to try to see if there was any common ground here, and I'm very disappointed that this is the first day that the 2 sides have to Senator Norman's point, that the 2 sides have sat down and basically the first step here was just to basically get their disagreements on the table.
Meetings, that's the problem.
What's that?
There's no more meetings.
I get that, but I would like to hear the comments for and against each of those amendments.
All right. Those that want to speak first in favor of Senator Servell's amendment, come up here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Nate Benferrata from the Southern Environmental Law Center. Appreciate everyone's work on this, including Senator Servell. We continue to have concerns not about SMRs and the fact that they can produce electricity, but about commercial viability. There is literally one commercial prototype in operation in the world. It's a floating barge in Russia in terms of a power plant production. The leading project, as members mentioned, is a project out in Utah. Construction has not yet begun. The estimated cost has almost doubled to $9.3 billion for one facility. And you know that's why we're really concerned about moving too quickly on SMRs until we have more evidence of commercial viability and how they fit in. You know, I do a lot of work at the State Corporation Commission. We have an IRP plan, an integrated resource plan with Dominion coming up in May. We haven't gotten into the weeds on SMRs yet and the need for them and whether we can continue building out solar and wind and batteries, which the company has been doing quite well at so far. We haven't established a real urgency to make this really big decision. This is a decision that really comes down to tens of billions of dollars. If we're talking about 3 facilities, tens of billions of dollars onto ratepayers. And so we certainly think Senator Servell's proposal gets us much further into the right direction, removing that mandate to establish the pilot program, taking out the liberally construe language, and really importantly, putting cost containment explicit protections in there. That is critical. We've seen nuclear projects moved forward in other states, in Georgia and South Carolina, where they put nuclear development risks onto ratepayers, and it's been a real problem. Plant Vogtle in Georgia, they've had massive cost overruns and delays. That plant is now the most expensive power plant ever built. And I'll be clear, it's not an SMR, it's a conventional nuclear power plant, but it's the most expensive power plant ever built. It's now $35 billion.
You need to wrap up.
I'll close with Plant Summer. That plant will never produce electricity in South Carolina. Ratepayers are now paying for abandonment costs of $2.3 billion for a filled-in hole in the ground. That's what we really support Senator Servell's amendments, particularly those customer protections.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Connor Kush with the Sierra Club. I won't reiterate everything that Mr. Benferrata just said, but I want to reiterate that we really appreciate Senator Servell's substitute because we think it moves SMRs forward in a reliable and responsible way, and would encourage you to support Senator Servell's substitute. Thank you.
Next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Albert Pollard, representing the Virginia Poverty Law Center. We just appreciate the committee taking up both versions. They're huge steps forward from what came out of the House. We want to make sure that that consumers are not on the hook for energy that never gets produced, which is something that Senator Survels has, that Senator Lewis's might not unless they put it into the final order. The one question which you might want to ask counsel is, I believe that if something is applied for under a RAC, I'm not positive, then you get construction work in progress payment, which they might not be able to write that into the final order under Senator Lewis's amendment, even if that's was not his intention. That you start getting paid when you are spending money if it's under a RAC as opposed
Hold on
to.
one second. Both of you have in there that consumer pays nothing until the plant's, you have, just yours has it. Okay.
Yeah, so if it's applied for under a RAC, Mr. Chairman, then that might, even if that wasn't Senator Lewis's intention, that might be an outcome.
Okay.
And I just
All right.
am not a good enough at that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, and with my deepest regards to the patron for my favorite pony bill, I do have to iterate Climate Cabinet Action's strong support for Senator Surville's version. Thank you.
All right, those who support Senator Lewis.
Just FYI, Pollard did talk to me on the House side for about 10 minutes. We did talk when the bill was in the House.
Mr. Chairman, once again, Bernie McNamee from McGuire Woods on behalf of Dominion, speaking in favor of Senator Lewis's bill. We believe that his bill achieves the points that are trying to be goal of making sure that the commission has the authority to make the decision about whether or not costs are just and reasonable, and that it's an elegant way in which to do that. The bill itself doesn't mandate under, as it's designed under Delegate Marshall's version, and with the Lewis Amendment, it does not mandate that they be built. It's all within the discretion of the general or the State Corporation Commission to make the decision if an application is made and they're able to prove that it is just and reasonable.
If the committee adopts Senator Lewis's, we would have to add to that the ratepayers in Virginia wouldn't pay a penny until that plant is up and operating. And if it never operates, they shouldn't pay anything. In other words, we don't want a situation similar to what you saw in South Carolina. You follow me?
I understand.
Right. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I got a question. I got some questions for him based on what he just said.
I would.
We need to wrap this up.
I get it. I get it, Mr. Chairman. But how is it that the commission has discretion when the bill says shall?
It says that they shall create a small modular nuclear reactor project, but it doesn't say that it would approve any application if it isn't just and reasonable. The only ones that would have to be approved are the just and reasonable.
So, all right, Senator Marsden.
Thank you. Would you say that obviously this bill would go to conference, at this point? Would you say you have more issues on the table if Senator Surville's bill was the one that came out of, or his substitute came out of this committee? Would that give more opposing issues that?
It would make it much more difficult.
Make it more difficult, but would it be more comprehensive in terms of the issues that are in disagreement?
I would respond in two ways about that. One, a number of the provisions in Senator Surville's bill would create further roadblocks to being able to approve an SMR and would make it more complicated to come to a resolution, I would assume, in whatever negotiations would take place in conference. And that's also, just for full disclosure, Chairman, the company would likely not be supportive of the provision that you recommended.
Senator Spruill.
Yes, sir. Please.
Oh, I'm sorry, sir.
I have two questions. One, it was saying about the customer don't pay a dime till it's up and operating. My question is, when it's up and operating, will that cost be passed on to the customer?
Yes, if a facility is up and operating, whatever costs that aren't covered with whatever tax credits or loans from the federal government, those would be paid for by customers.
Thank you. Last question, Mr. Chairman. Then once it's all up and operating, we're ready to go. Now, I'm noticing we want to do something different. Now it's nuclear. Could you say to me, by everything being nuclear, that the light bill or whatever you might have will be cheaper? Because if you go to the SCC, they're going to pay the same old role they're doing now, tip for tab. So I want to know, by going nuclear, would the rates be cheaper for the customer?
Unfortunately, that's a complicated response. Of course, if you invest capital, it's going to raise the costs for customers on one hand. But if it's able to provide power more cheaply than, let's say, what the company would have to buy from PJM, it could save customers money. And so over time, it may save customers money, but I can't promise that. It's just depending on how the market's going to work in terms of the cost of power.
You don't have a fuel cost, you get a
Right.
flatter cost.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. We'll vote first on Senator Servels and then on Senator Lewis's. All right, those in favor of Senator Servels, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? No. All right, let's go on the board. All right, if you're in favor of Senator Servels, vote aye. There.
Is there any opposition to this bill? You said for one side or the other, but actually I have opposition.
Okay. All right, so the bill that is before us
Ayes 10, noes 5.
is now been modified by Senator Servels. All right. Okay. We're going to have about 2 minutes on each side, so just come up and say whether you're opposed to the bill or you're not opposed to the bill. All right, those supporting the bill as amended, that's 2333 as amended by Senator Servels, come up here. All right. Quickly, though, okay?
Nate Benferrato, Southern Environmental Law Center. We appreciate everything the center has done, and we still have concerns about SMRs generally, but we support where we're headed.
All right, next.
We support as amended.
Okay. Next.
Chris Lane, League of Conservation Voters. We
All
support
right.
as amended as well.
Anybody opposed to what the bill is now?
This is not opposition. Dominion supports the bill going to conference.
Okay, which is where it's headed. All right, ma'am, you want to come up here?
That's good, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Chairman, Senators. And I appreciate the amendments, especially for Senator Servels. But frankly, this whole fiasco with small nuclear reactors, or the SMRs, besides being a mother and a grandmother, I also have been following with the NRC, as well as with, I am one of the only public members that has gone to pretty much every meeting for the Virginia Nuclear Energy Consortium since its inception. I wanted to say that this industry, especially, it's all on paper. So I appreciate some of these amendments, but the reality is nuclear cannot compete.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, please spare me just a moment.
Well, we need to wrap this up.
I would like to wrap this up, but I would like to say that there's a fundamental problem with nuclear. It doesn't matter the size, the design, the coolant, or the type of fuel. All is based on splitting atoms, and they don't disappear.
Okay.
Yet get broken into hundreds of pieces that are millions of times more radioactive than the fuel that you started with. The fact is that every nuclear reactor, no matter the size, is not just a machine to generate electricity or heat, but is also a warehouse of radioactive poisons.
Ma'am, you need to finish up. We need to vote on this. We've got one more bill, and then budget conferees have to meet.
Well, I'm simply saying that, the Virginia citizens and the public has a right to be part of the energy future, and our children and our grandchildren are going to inherit. If we continue to go down the nuclear path, we're just going to create more nuclear waste that we don't have a solution for. Right now, we are already the pilot program that Dominion made us for a canister to see if the fuel that we've already generated will even be able to be okay in the canisters, and it's even transportable. So that's not even going to be due until like 2027. So I just think we're putting the cart ahead of the horse.
All right, so you're opposed to the bill.
I am opposed to making us a guinea pig and test pilot program, period, and especially for the people in Southwest Virginia.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, so we still got the question about 3 sites for a pilot program.
His had.
It says 3.
His had one site.
No, sir, I believe it says 3.
His had 3 sites.
3 reactors or 1?
3 sites.
Limited sites. All right.
Mr. Chairman, to me, a pilot is 1.
Pardon?
To me, a pilot is 1 project.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding.
Mr.
but-
Chairman, we also have two different companies here. One's a phase 1, one's a phase 2, and we would end up having to choose between the 2 of them. I think this is a matter for the conferees to take up.
We can do that. All right. That's be discussed there. I'm sure it'll wind up in conference.
Yes, sir.
All right. Bills before us, as amended. With a substitute. Motion to report, is there a second? All right, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, no. All right,
Ayes 13, noes 2.
House Bill 2333 with the substitute is reported.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. Dale, did Kilgore come up?
All right.
With your bill that has.
I have, you want to do House Bill 2486? There's a substitute. Right, Tom. Mark.
Okay, all right, let's do 2486.
All right, Mr. Chairman, there's a substitute.
Motion to adopt the substitute. All right, all those in favor of adopting the substitute, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All right, substitute's adopted.
Briefly, Mr. Chairman, House Bill 2486 addresses the enormous power disparity between soft drink companies and Virginia independent soft drink bottlers. And what it does, most of our independent soft drink bottlers spend many years and generations building a prosperous business, manufacturing, marketing, distributing the product. But now currently, when a soft drink bottler seeks to transfer that ownership to another family business or to sell it to another bottler, a soft drink company can just outright block that sale or transfer, and it can withhold its consent without requiring any reason for doing so. So what the substitute does, it makes 4 changes to the introduced bill. It includes a second enactment clause to clarify that the legislation only applies to agreements entered into after July 1, 2023, or agreements modified after that date. This was done to make sure that it didn't impact existing agreements. Also clarifies that the same reasonableness standard a soft drink company will use in reviewing offers or sale by third parties will also apply to offers or sales to family members. Substitute clarifies that if a soft drink company does not consent to an offer or sale to a third party, but instead wants to buy that bottler's business directly, that it must be the offer must be fair market value as independently determined. And finally, we remove the substitute on jurisdiction. I think I have Mr. Scott Johnson here to testify to that, and tell you just a little bit about it, just briefly. So, Scott.
Scott, come forward.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Scott Johnson. I represent 3 of the family bottlers that still exist in Virginia. There are only a handful. I represent Pepsi Bottling of Norton, represent Pepsi Bottling of Central Virginia and Charlottesville, and Dr. Pepper of Stanton. Let me bring you some facts that summarize, I think, how we got here. Generally speaking, soft drink bottlers, the family businesses like I represent, and the soft drink companies had gotten along pretty well. Everybody was symbiotic. Things changed in 2019 when the Keurig Coffee Company purchased Dr. Pepper. And that is where Virginia became ground zero. We started to see a change in conduct. I can't tell you that it occurred in any other state. It occurred here, and that's what we dealt with. And so the first issue came up in 2019, a year later. Pepsi-Cola of Central Virginia had an agreement with 7-Up down near Senator Spruill's district and Senator Lucas's district in the north of Portsmouth area. And basically, they came to loggerheads with Dr. Pepper that ultimately gave rise to Dr. Pepper making a take-it-or-leave-it offer. And so Pepsi-Cola bottling in Charlottesville sold out of that. Fast forward to the next year, 2020. Pepsi-Cola bottling of Norton began looking for buyers, hired a broker to go out to the market and say, we're interested in selling. Where can we get offers? And where can we get that? Pepsi-Cola bottling of Norton had an agreement with Pepsi, had an agreement with Dr. Pepper. And under those agreements, both companies would have to approve the sale. Everybody knew that going in. In the fall of 21, Pepsi-Cola bottling in Norton selected one of their bidders. And at that point in time, presented that bidder to the Pepsi-Cola company. And the Pepsi-Cola company readily approved that. It was another bottler. They knew them in the business. And we understand that's been Pepsi's tradition. Unfortunately, what happened next is where things made Virginia really a ground zero. Dr. Pepper said that they would not consent to the sale to this other bottler, and that created a different problem. Pepsi bottling of Norton is 70% Pepsi, 30% Dr. Pepper. All of the bidders had conditioned their bids to say, we want the whole business. We don't want just 70%. So when Dr. Pepper didn't consent to it, those bidders turned away. Then Dr. Pepper said to Pepsi of Norton, we want to buy you back in. We want to buy you back in through one of our subsidiaries. And Pepsi Bottle of Norton said, well, we'll sell to you, just meet the bid I had. And they said, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. And next thing we heard is they wanted a non-disclosure agreement assigned and wanted Pepsi Bottle of Norton to release all the financial information, not only to Dr. Pepper, but to the subsidiary of theirs, who was a competitor who they were looking at buying the company. So that was January of 22, and we're now in February of 23. And so what we come to you with hat in hand and ask you to raise the tide for all of the 5 or so companies that are left in Virginia is to impose a reasonableness standard and a fair market standard. And if you look at the substitute, I'm going to draw your attention just to 2 places. If you look at line 34, all we're saying to a company is, soft drink company, if the bottler presents you an offer for somebody, be reasonable in saying if you approve it or not. You may have any agreement that we can't sell to somebody who's a felon, you can't sell to somebody who's taken bankruptcy, that's fine, but all that says is be reasonable. The other place I draw your attention is line 49, and that basically says to the Dr. Peppers and others of the world, if they want to, in essence, bid you back in, it's got to be a fair market value bid. And I want to thank the work of Delegate Bell in helping on that language and giving counsel on that. And that in fair market value is determined by an independent valuation, a CPA, an appraisal, just not a fly-by-night number that somebody grabs out of the air. Mr. Chairman, let me conclude by this, if I may. You have had business come to you to level the playing field on a select number of times, but you answered the call every time. 1950, you answered the call when you put a reasonableness standard in the Wine Franchise Act. 1978, you did it for the Beer Franchise Act. 1998, you passed the auto dealer protections. 1998, you passed the heavy equipment protections. Those people selling bulldozers.
Senator Norman has a question.
Scott, I love you like a prodigal son, but your chronology and taking us through history since Adam and Eve is overwhelming. If I could ask a couple of questions. First of all, as we were told this is prospective, if this legislation is passed in the substitute form, what does it do as far as the current situation?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Norman, it would not change what has happened with Pepsi Bottle of Norton in the past, but if the agreements with any of the soft drink companies are new agreements, revised agreements, or modified after July 1, then it would put in place the reasonableness standard and the fair market value standard. That was one of the concerns we heard, that the bill as introduced would impact current agreements. and we didn't want to run into that.
All right, and the second question, Mr. Chairman. You talk about reasonableness. Are there any metrics that are incorporated in the substitute as to determining what the fair market value is?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Norman, there are not specific metrics in the substitute other than it's got to be an independent valuation, and that is on line 50. And generally in the business, that is when somebody goes to appraise a business, you get a CPA to certify, here are your finances, here are your numbers. It's not a specific metric beyond that.
Mr. Chairman, the third question. I've got a sophomore knowledge of franchise agreements and some of the criteria that are embedded in those. But most franchises have a licensure issue of which bottling does not. Does that make a difference in what we're trying to do here?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest to Senator Norman, I do not think it does. I mean, what is in the substitute does not create a soft drink franchise law in Virginia. But at the same time, if you look at the definitions in the substitute, it talks about a soft drink bottling company licensing a bottler to do certain things, assemble product, sell canned drinks, sell bottled drinks, you know, that type of thing. So the license agreement that exists between a soft drink company and a bottler generally dictates that.
Senator Sproul.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Mr. Johnson, have the company went to Dr. Pepper and says, we want to sit down with you to see whether or not you will buy us out. Have they sit down to offer to Dr. Pepper to say that we might want you to buy us out?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Sproul, so Pepsi Cola of Norton hired a broker and put out to the market, we're for sale, and got bids. When they took the bid to Dr. Pepper to say, will you approve this as you need to do under the agreement, that's when Dr. Pepper said, no, we want to bid you back in. Then
Mr. Chairman, I'm not talking about other companies, I'm talking about Dr. Pepper. I understand the bid, they say no for others. My question is that have your company says to Dr. Pepper, have they said to Dr. Pepper and say, will you negotiate to buy us back yourself, not somebody else?
Yep, Mr. Chairman, Senator Sproul, the answer is yes. Because when Dr. Pepper didn't approve the independent bid and Dr. Pepper said, we want to buy you, the company said, fine, match that bid. Dr. Pepper said it doesn't work that way.
Thank you.
Get this straight. So, bottom line, you all want the ability to be able to approve prospective franchisees?
Mr. Chairman, no, sir. All this is saying is going forward in the soft drink bottling business for these family businesses, if they get a bid to sell or an offer to sell to somebody else, and they present it to the soft drink company has got to be reasonable in determining if they're going to approve it or not. And the grounds for reasonableness is the license agreement the soft drink company has with the bottler. The second thing is the scenario that Senator Sproul asked about is if the soft drink company does not want to approve the sale, but instead wants to buy you back in, their offer to you has got to be a fair market value offer that's determined by an independent evaluation, an appraisal, a CPA, something like that.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Edwards.
Yeah. Has any other state gotten involved in buying and selling franchises in the soft drink industry that means that somebody has to determine whether it's reasonable or not, and independent evaluation of what's reasonable? Isn't that a business issue that states shouldn't get involved in?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Edwards, I'm not aware that there's been a problem in any other state involving soft drinks except Virginia. And I was mentioning earlier, you on many occasions as a General Assembly have had to step in and impose reasonableness. In 1998, you had to pass the Heavy Equipment Act because...
I understand that. But in terms of soft drink and orange juice or things like that, apples, whatever it happens to be, you have a franchise. I'm buying and selling. I have a franchise on apples. You know, has the state ever gotten involved in saying somebody's got to tell you whether it's reasonable or not?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, they've got involved in it in beer and wine, in chainsaws, in weed eaters, lawnmowers, bulldozers, tractor trailers, and cars. Yes, sir.
Every single one of them.
Yes, sir.
Because we want them to have the ability to do what they know they needed to do.
Yes, sir.
You can draw, you can say, well, yes, in order to be a franchisee, you don't follow someone A, B, and C, which are common sense. But beyond that, you do what you need to do. We need to move this.
Right. But can I just ask, Mr. Chairman, will you ask the families that have traveled across the state today from the Cumberland Gap to stand or wait?
Just to stand, they're in support, folks that are in support of the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
These are the people who want to buy or sell.
These are my clients. These are the little guys, the family businesses, the bottlers.
They want to sell or they want to buy?
These do.
They want to keep in business, but when they want to sell, they want to be treated reasonable and fair. They're the ones that came today by gas in their car. They didn't fly in.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Those who support the bill.
That's why I had those folks stand up. Oh, yeah.
Okay, those who are opposed to the bill.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Chrissy Noonan on behalf of Keurig Dr. Pepper, and we oppose the bill. You heard a lot today about a specific issue and even a specific contract, and I would submit to you that there is a place where those types of disputes between private parties can be resolved. It's court, where there are rules of evidence, there are opportunities for discovery, and the parties are under oath. And while I think I might take some satisfaction in refuting specific claims that were made today and over the past few weeks about a contract to which we are a party, we are bound by those same terms by which we agreed, and as a result, I'll be limited as to what I can say about that specific contract. What I can discuss and what I would respectfully ask this committee to consider is what the forward-looking policy of the Commonwealth should be as to this industry. You've heard comparisons being drawn between the soda industry and the beer and wine wholesalers and the auto dealers. The bill's proponents have said, we did it over here, so why don't we do it for soft drinks? Well, I took the liberty of printing the statutes and all of the regulations that apply to those three industries. And as you can see, it's a lot. It is a substantial amount of governing regulations because these industries are well established, not only in Virginia, but nationwide. The advocates in this space are well known. They come to the General Assembly almost every year with bills that impact their industry. What you have before you would be a first-in-the-nation change and a sweeping change to regulate soft drinks in the exact same way. Also, in this big pile of documents, there are so many provisions outlining things like who can participate, how do you qualify, where can you participate. There are licensing standards, there are record-keeping requirements. None of that is in the 2.5-page bill that's in front of you. And not only are there all of these regulations, but there are also governing boards. The Motor Vehicle Dealer Board has 19 members. The ABC Board has 5 full-time board members that can oversee any disputes that arise in this industry. None of that is present within the bill before you today.
Okay, there, Senator Sproul.
This morning, in my office, I had one question. My question was, the owner, this particular, did he offer to sit down with the company, with Dr. Pepper, and say, I want to buy out? If I'm not mistaken, I haven't heard anything also. They told me no. Am I right or wrong about that?
Senator Sproul, members of the committee, again, while I hesitate to speak directly to one contract, I will say,
Mr. Chairman, not speaking to a contract. The gentleman is sitting right there. Sir, can you come up, please, Mr. Chairman? That one question, no nothing else.
Maybe I've got a question.
Senator Tom Ponder, Senior Vice President for Keurig Dr. Pepper.
I asked you this question, is that I was concerned about the gentleman
Yep.
not getting a fair price. Did you not tell me, unless I misunderstood, is that they did not come to you to offer to sit down for you to buy them out?
What we said is we would sit down with a mutual non-disclosure so that they couldn't share our offer with anybody else.
No, sir.
Or likewise with that.
I'm talking about
So-
we will sit down. My question was, did they offer to you to come to sit down to work it out?
Not to me, no.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we need to wrap this up. It's 10 after 6. All right, yes,
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Karen Addison, representing Coca-Cola. We're also opposed to the bill for the reasons stated.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman, Trey Adams on behalf of Pepsi. We oppose the bill. Senator Norman identified the heavily regulated industries. Virginia has a franchise act for the people that invest in a McDonald's or a Quiznos. This kind of judicial review of a sale is not part of that and really has no business in the soft
Okay.
drink industry. Thank you.
All right, bills before us. You've heard the bill, Senator Eben.
You're saying the Franchise Act is of no use in this situation? Doesn't apply?
I mentioned it by way of example. We have a retail franchise act for folks who buy franchises. It's focused on the retail side.
Retail.
But
Okay,
as
not-
folks talk about the unequal bargaining power, the discussion in this Franchise Act is it's there to help with the unequal bargaining power, but this is not a tool granted to them.
Thank you.
All right, bills before us. There's a motion and a second report. All right, all those in favor of reporting House Bill 2486 as a substitute, vote aye. Those who are opposed, vote nay.
Ayes 7, noes 8.
Ayes 7, noes 8. The bill is not reported. Okay.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right,
you.
Delegate Kilgore, you have one more bill.
I got one more bill, Bitcom bill. It's House Bill 1784. It deals with Bitcoin and Dow legislation. It's Virginia Decentralized Autonomous Organization Act. It is it's in the Bitcoin area, and it's sort of it's an organization that is run using smart contracts on a blockchain rather than it's by being controlled by a central authority or a group of people. So basically, that's what it is. I got an expert here real quick that I'll bring up here real quick, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Senators, I'm Caleb Taylor with the Virginia Blockchain Council. Here to answer your questions, help develop the bill, and of course, we're here in support of the bill as well.
Questions of the patron?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, what is the purpose of this bill?
Dow is a new type of corporate structure. It essentially eliminates CEO, CFO, COO positions, the managing partners of a corporation or a LLC, actually, and replaces them with a algorithm called a smart contract. The smart contract is given a set of code to make decisions based upon particular certain things happen, and then the business takes action. If those things don't happen, then the business doesn't take action.
Mr. Chairman, has the Virginia Business, the Virginia Bar Association, the corporate section, or anybody like that looked at this as a viable approach?
This is the approach that it is being essentially established throughout the United States. Right now, Wyoming, Tennessee, a number of other states have established similar. Texas, a number of other states have already established similar things. These businesses, there are about 4,000 of these that are currently incorporated in the United States, many of which exist in Wyoming, it having the most clear language. And there are a uncounted number that are not incorporated, that are operating either as partnerships or something like that.
This way, what's the benefit of it, tax-wise or some otherwise?
Exactly. It essentially clarifies the space, so these organizations can incorporate and exist in Virginia, begin operating, and just begin doing business.
I mean, Mr. Chairman, there are a lot of, limited liability corporations. There are all different kinds of corporate structures. How does this differ than, what benefit is it as opposed to the others that people have?
This really just creates separation between LLCs and what a DAO is. There are certain very particular circumstances with a DAO that the LLC Act really can't cover. The Virginia LLC Act, and I want you to understand, the Virginia LLC Act still applies to these businesses, except in certain situations where, for instance, maybe a CEO or a board would handle a certain circumstance, whereas this wouldn't be handled in that space. The algorithm would.
Wait, Senator Serval has a question.
Yes, go ahead.
There's a
I don't have a
substitute.
question, Mr. Chairman. I have a motion. I was going to speak to my motion.
There's a substitute.
It's a substitute.
Yeah.
Those in support, any opposition?
I didn't speak. Ben Knotts in support Americans for Prosperity. And to answer the senator's questions, this bill does two things. I don't know if you're, we're in support of the bill, and this bill does two things. The first section, it creates an exemption for blockchain that is not being traded as securities. Now, I bet you've got grandkids, they might, or kids, they might have bought, let's say, blockchain tied to a cosplay costume in Star Wars, and the DAO is a group of people. There's no CEO. They create a smart contract to say, hey, we as a group are going to make these decisions around that, but they're trading Star Wars costumes. Now, that shouldn't be treated as a security, and there's countless amount of DAOs that are trading things that aren't securities. So that's what the first part of the bill does. The second part of the bill with regards to saying this is what DAOs are. Essentially, the paper that was distributed right there, it talks about how right now there are unincorporated DAOs in the United States. There's thousands of them. And if somebody buys blockchain, they could be sued for unlimited liability simply because they bought blockchain on an unincorporated market. What this bill does by putting it in the code, it says here's how you can legally go in and create a DAO in Virginia. And in doing so, we bring them into the light. And working with Delegate Maldonado after the bill came out of the House, she was very concerned about the transparency and auditing of this. So we added provisions, and that's what the substitute will do, is put in an auditing element so there is more transparency in this. And it does have a delayed enactment to 2025, and we have a work group that will get the weeds worked out of this. So we do hope to support the bill. Sorry for taking long.
Well, I don't have a question, Mr. Chairman. I just have a motion and speak to my motion. If you want to, I guess we can take the testimony if you like.
Those in opposition to the bill?
These are still in support.
All right. Bills before us.
Mr. Chairman.
I can be really fast.
Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, good evening, members of the committee. Eric Lang from Hunton on behalf of the Virginia Bar Association. There's a lot of testimony I could give. Let me make it simple. There is no legitimate use for a DAO that cannot already be achieved through more stable tested means. Anything you can do with a DAO, you can already do other ways.
Okay.
Oh, and we oppose the bill.
Mr. Chairman, this is all I want to say. I've been listening to hours of podcasts for the last year, and I still don't completely understand what blockchain is or how it works and how Bitcoin works and how these square up, okay? And I just, my point is that I think this is something that might have some utility, but I also think it needs to be looked at a lot more carefully before we dive in. And what I would suggest is that we direct the SEC to look at this. They're the entity that decides how our incorporated entities work and all that. I think they're probably, exactly, and that would be my motion.
Second.
All right, the motion is passed by definitely a letter from the chair to the SEC requesting that they look at the issue.
I understand, we got some time.
All right, you've heard the motion. All those in favor vote aye, those opposed nay.
Ayes 12, noes 3.
Ayes 12, there's 3, the motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee will rise.